Good evening, everybody. It's Officer Dan back with episode 3 of A Scotch and a Beer with Officer Dan. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're enjoying this. For those of you that haven't watched this yet, basically I drink a scotch and a beer and I tell a story. It's that simple. So in the first 2 episodes, I went over how I got suckered into drifting. Bought a car, did some donuts, failed at my first 2 events, got top 16 at my 3rd, and crashed the car over a curb for no reason whatsoever. Hey! Now what might my second season entail? You might ask? Hey, you might not, but I don't know. I'm gonna get right into that. But first, let me explain my beverages of choice. Got 2 special ones for you today. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is something that you can't get in the United States. It's called the Hammerhead 23, aka Michael Jordan's number. Now, this scotch right here is probably older than a lot of you that are even watching this in the first place. Definitely older than a lot of people that are into drifting. This was distilled in 1989. Deal with it. Let me go over the differences between a Scotch whiskey and just a regular single malt. Kind of like champagne has to be from Champagne in France, otherwise it's a sparkling wine or other assorted adult beverages. Scotches are the same way. It's not a scotch unless it's from Scotland or the islands around Scotland. So this is a single malt, and a single malt means that it is distilled at one brewery using the same ingredients. Basically, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the basics of a single malt. A blended scotch is mixed from all over the place, and anyway, that's a different story. So this is a Czech single malt, and this one has a pretty special story to it on its own. Think back to 1989, and well over 20 years ago, just before the Berlin Wall was torn down and the East, as we knew it, would change forever. The old distillery in Pradlo, outside the outskirts of Plzeň, which is where Pilsners are from, by the way, had been producing high-quality pot-still spirits for many years, and now the elite in Czechoslovakia decided that they should produce a single malt whiskey of unparalleled quality. With great effort, they managed to maintain and install a traditional cast-iron hammer mill, which was made back in 1928, and is exactly the same type as you would find in most traditional Scottish distilleries. They used only Czech barley and the crisp, clean water from the Bohemia region. Then they made oak casks of 100% Czech oak wood, and made a single malt that should be unique to the world. The wall fell and the whiskey was forgotten. Now keep in mind, this is still when it was under communist rule. So this is super illegal that they were doing this in the first place. The wall fell and the whiskey was forgotten. It lay dormant in the cellars for over 20 years in unique casks until it was discovered by these Hammerhead guys. It would be a crime to keep this gem hidden from whiskey lovers around the world, and we've decided to share with you what was once for a chosen few. In order to honor the hard work, and despite its terrible noise, we have named the whiskey after the nickname of the old mill, which was so vital for the production of this nectar. So enjoy a dram that is truly different from the pack. 23-year-old Czech single malt, the Hammerhead. So being as how it spent its whole life in new wood, so they didn't use used barrels like most people do. They use bourbon or sherry or other casks to age the scotch, so that's where it gets its flavors from. It took on a totally different flavor. There are definitely hints of turpentine up in this mother. But it's a super special scotch, and I do enjoy it because I will be flying to the Czech Republic probably as this video is getting released. My wife's already over there, and I will see her shortly. Hopefully I can pick up another one of these. Cheers to the Czech Republic, formerly known as Czechoslovakia. Drop some knowledge at you. Definitely has an initial punch to it. It's a very sweet scotch, however. Hints of vanilla, but that turpentine is right on the palate once you swallow this for the first time. So if you ever get a chance to try this, highly recommend it. All right, now that we've spent way too much time talking about the scotch, let's move on to the beer. This is the Quinquagenary. Stupid name. Anyway, it's Trader Joe's. They release this every winter. So if you go to Trader Joe's and it's wintertime, around Christmas, they make these every year. So the first ones I ever got were in 2016, which I have thusly drank. Now, it does say you should store these up, and they develop unique flavors. So I usually buy like 3 or 4 of them, and I put them in the shelf, and I enjoy them at later times, like sharing it with you guys. So this one, in particular, is the 2017, so even this one is 3 years old. These things are fantastic. They're already 9% alcohol by volume, so I may get a little tipsy on this one real quick. Woo! little snafu there with the old cork pop. That went off like some champagne. But damn, that is good. Idiot. It's okay, my pants are now beer flavored. My dog will love it later. Oh dear Lord, what have I done? It's my first time pouring a beer apparently. Well, I've poured myself some head. There's a little beer down there at the bottom. I'm gonna let that settle for just a little bit. So let's get this story started. Not a lot happened to the car over the off season except for maybe an oil change and one very specific mod that I'd like to talk about right now. If you're into drifting, it's one of the best things that you could possibly do for yourself. I got a racing seat for Christmas. I believe it was a Momo Start, my first racing seat. For those of you that don't have a racing seat, you know that it really sucks. As you're drifting, you have to use your thighs to brace yourself against the sides of your car, and after every single drift event, you're left with bruises on the bottoms of your knees and on the tops of your thighs. And it sucks. Not only that, but you have to constantly fight to keep yourself in a position to be able to actually steer. So that's taking concentration away from what you should be doing, driving. So anyway, I got a racing seat for Christmas and I threw that sucker in. Good Lord, what a change it was. Other than that, I had a pretty good winter. I was saving up money for the next season because I knew there was going to be X amount of events that I was going to have to spend $180 on each. God, that still hurts me. They should have charged like half price for all the guys without cages because we weren't allowed to do top 16. So even if we did qualify, what's the difference? I also headed back out to the track to volunteer as a corner worker for some of the road race days. Just to, you know, meet some people, do some nice things for the racing community, so on and so forth. There was only a couple events over the winter, so I was happy to go out there and lend a hand. Highly recommend doing that. It gets you in touch with the correct people if you ever want to run events, etc., etc., etc. Now, here's the important thing about my off season. I got my first sponsor. So after having sucked the first 3 events of my first season, I didn't have a lot on my resume, so I wasn't expecting a lot from any sponsorships that I may have been perusing. There was a guy that used to come to the drift events to change tires. His name was JD. He worked with a company called AJ Tires. They're out of Gallup. Really nice guy, family-owned business. Anyway, they opened up a branch here, and I got to talking to him and ended up scoring a deal where they would change my tires, take my takeoffs away, and do all of the things that are really annoying and expensive to do with lots of tires. Put a logo on the car. It was the first actual logo on the car. Off I went with my first sponsor. Keep in mind that I literally had nothing to my name in drifting at this point other than 3 shitty events that I can't even compete in. But I had a good presence, I'm a friendly person, and they accepted. So, bonus for me. Hey, I got some beer now. Let's be a little more careful this time, huh? There we go. In honor of going to the Czech Republic, I'm going to leave the head at European levels. If you don't get this much head at a Czech restaurant, you can send your beer back, or most people do. I guess it says how fresh the beer is. That is sweet, delicious, and fantastic. So got my racing seat in. I'm now sponsored. Big things ahead on the horizon for me. One time during the winter, I actually got to go rent out the track with a couple of buddies of mine, John, this guy Morrow, and Tony, and we shredded, and it was 1 car on the track at a time, so no tandem because we didn't have safety crew there, and we just learned the course. So in the process of doing that, we spent 2 hours out there, and I went through every tire that I had because we got so much track time, and I wasn't used to that, getting 4 or 5 laps at an event. What I did find out is that with like 90 PSI in my rear tires, I was able to do our big oval. It's a 3/8 bank. It's a big bank. Anyway, whatever. So I was able to do our big bank. Be it I was entering as late as I possibly could. I wasn't riding the gangster line, and hell, I wasn't even on the correct line, period. But I was able to maintain a very shallow drift all the way through into the small oval and bring it back around. I could not tell you how excited I was to be able to do that. Now, of course, the first event rolls around and we're not doing big ovals, so I don't get to showcase my newfound skill. This season was a little bit different than normal. The season before, they had like 6 events for this Pro-Am feeder series that they were running. They aren't doing the Pro-Am Nationals in Laughlin this next year, so he cuts it back down to 4 events, and the first one is in January. So it's late January, it's cold, all the CO bros are down, we're having a good time. We all meet up in the morning and we head out to the event. Upon arrival at the first round of the New Mexico Drift Series circa 2008, I ponied up my $180 and proceeded to enter into the pits. One bonus about coming in from last season is I didn't take any of the stickers off my windshield. My number was on there and the NM Drift Series logo was on there, so I didn't have to buy new ones. Hashtag savings. Oh, that's a punch in the face. Every time. Now my skills had leveled up a couple of notches over the winter. I went to my secret spot, I practiced, I made little courses to go around. I was probably sitting at a solid 2 of 10, so I was negative coming into this season. Working my way up here, people. Now I'm back at the pits, and I wanted to talk about one other sweet upgrade that I got myself over the winter. A Harbor Freight 1/2-inch impact. Changed my life! My whole last season and every other time I changed tires up to this point had been with a tire iron, and a tire iron, and a tire iron, and a tire iron, and a tire iron. It takes forever and it's annoying. All the cool kids had freaking impacts, so I went out and bought the cheapest one that I possibly could, which was at Harbor Freight. I still have it to this day and it still works just fine. Now this course is a lot more friendly towards us with no horsepower. Since we're not doing the big oval, we're just sticking to the small oval, it kind of evened things out a little bit, but I hadn't run this course before. We jump straight into practice, I get my 4 laps, I know I'm struggling and not doing very well, and we go straight into qualifying. There was probably around 40 drivers there, so it was a good amount of people that I had to cut my way through to make it to top 16. I paid attention in the drivers meeting, I asked the right questions, I talked about what do I need to do to get the most points with a very, very low horsepower car. The judges said you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this, and I said okay, I'm gonna do my best to do that. I pull up to the line, I am pumped on being stoked, turn the radio down, I want to concentrate. First, well it takes forever because it's single overhead cam. Second, I enter way too late and spin out trying to not go off the track. Boom, nerves got the best of me. Pretty sure that happens to a lot of people. I was a little pissed, but you know, I can't be that disappointed. I'm still super new and I still super suck. I get back up to the line and the only change that I made this time was blasting some Dimmu Borgir. For those that don't know, that's a symphonic death metal band. I cranked the Dimmu Borgir and I took off for my second qualifying run. I entered kind of wonky, meaning I did kind of this weird double entry thing. I remember just being like, what am I doing with my hands? When I first started to drift, I always just forgot what to do with my hands. And so, like, I would enter and then I would do this weird thing on the wheel and chop wood. And anyway, that's something that you learn over time, and with lots of seat time, you overcome that problem. I stuck with it and I wrangled the car back into place and actually ended up being way offline, but still was able to maintain the drift through the corner. I made it all the way around. I transitioned at the clipping point very, very well. Of course, shallow angle because I had no horsepower, and then kicked it back around and actually filled the entire outer zone. Because I did that inner clip and that outer zone, my entry sucked. I was way offline at the beginning, but my 2 points that I knew that I could do, I did to the best of my ability. I knew I couldn't get the car out to the wall because it had 90 horsepower. This just wasn't happening. I finished my run. I completed the lap. Ended up getting 16th place. I was super stoked, but of course because I didn't have a roll cage, I didn't get to drive anymore that day, so I retired to the skid pad to do donuts and figure eights like I always do. And that was my first event of my second season. Because of the amazing work Niko did with the photo shoot for Failed Clothing, we kept bringing him out to the events, and check out this magic that he produced. It was at this very moment that I realized the media guys were the most important dudes on the racetrack. So thank you to all of the media guys who have ever worked with me, taken a photo of me. I appreciate you from the very, very bottom of my heart. And if you're out there trying to drift, make friends with the media dude. Bring them along with you for adventures. You never know what kind of relationships that'll spur. So I want to dedicate this episode to all the media folk. And that's why I wore my OMG Drift shirt, because Drew Fishbien is a very special person to me, and he always will be. Drew's been there since the very beginning, and he's published stuff on me when nobody gave two shits about who I was or where I was going with my drift career. Thank you, Drew. You are an amazing person, and I appreciate everything you've done for me. Cheers to you, senor. And thank you to all the media guys out there who spend countless hours and countless dollars of your own money to be out on the track with us idiots sliding our cars sideways. You guys are the real MVP. Now, since there were only 4 events this season and the first one was at the end of January, there was like 3 months in between each event that year. Not good if you're trying to get as much seat time as possible. Now, luckily for some awesome reason, unbeknownst to moi, a local church here in Rio Rancho, which is the city next to Albuquerque, called Sagebrush, decided, hey, you know, it's gonna be a good idea to throw a huge autocross in our church parking lot every single month. And it's free. Oh, this is a great combo of alcohol, guys. Just saying. Just saying. So anybody could go to these autocrosses with a driver's license and insurance on your car. And they had a sea of cones. Like, holy crap, a lot of cones. So I convinced the guy that ran the event, hey, please let me drift this. I promise I won't knock down all of your cones. Don't know if that was a promise that I could actually uphold, but I made the promise anyway. He agreed very cautiously and said, please do not hit any cones. It's a huge pain and you're gonna stop everybody else from driving if you do. And it was a pretty narrow course, but it was so much fun. And off I went in a first gear ball of glory and noise, really ugly noise. And I went all night until they quit running every single time that they had one of these. So I got to do basically 3 of those before I even got to do my next drift event. And I give a huge amount of credit to these Sagebrush autocrosses because it taught me car control, it taught me throttle control, and it taught me how to be very precise because I was so worried about hitting cones. So I did my absolute best to not hit cones, and I didn't. I brushed a couple, I would move them over, I would tilt them and they would fall back, but I never knocked any cones over. So that was the perfect stopgap for still getting track time and still learning and still progressing without paying a crap ton of money to get no laps. Event 2 rolls around, we all head out to the racetrack, we pit up, we pay our huge sum of money, go to the driver's meeting, listen to what they have to say, and this time, it's the big oval. Time to flex that skill, and or lack of. Qualifying comes around, and 25 minutes after I start first, still in first, second, still in second. This is painfully long. This is actually how long it takes. Third, approaching 40 miles an hour now. And initiate. Now, before I get into what happened next, I do want to say that this was a night event. So my first night event, there was a pretty decently sized crowd, which didn't happen at the other events. I had music on this time. And I remember thinking as I was rowing through the gears so eloquently, I did this before. I can do this again. I'm gonna make this happen. Anywho, I misjudged, entered way too early, so I initiate. Straight into an understeer combo, / both feet on the brake pedal, / go flying off the big oval at 40 miles an hour into the biggest dirt bath that I've ever received. It was in my mouth, people. My nose, my eyes. It's horrible because it's a full road course and the big oval goes up and around, and then there's another track that goes over the backside. I jumped far enough to land with the front wheels on the track. Needless to say, that's not the first time I will have jumped my car, but that's a whole different story altogether. The car doesn't feel right, so I get towed back to the pits. The drive of shame, going past all the spectators and wave and they clap and I suck. Now I get back to the pits and I decide, hey, let's assess the damage. Luckily, it was mostly cosmetic. I'd ripped my lip off, the wheel contacted the fender and kind of wrinkled it out just a little bit, pushed it back into place, everything was hunky-dory, but the car wouldn't start. So we jacked it up, took the front tire off, and it had rubbed a hole in the wiring harness. So Sick, didn't know I had to relocate that. Lesson learned. I probably could have fixed the wiring, but I'd also broken a tie rod and didn't have any spares. I'm sure I could have borrowed one from somebody at the track, but qualifying was really quick since there weren't that many cars, and I probably would have missed my second one, so I decided to hang up the hat. And just like that, my night was over. If only I had knew then that this was just a small taste of the things to come in the future. Just kidding, I'm not gonna do that. So, I ended up paying $50 to the guy that ran the events. He had a 2-car trailer, which was not being utilized for 2 cars, and he gave me a tow back to my house. He was an FD driver at the time, and we got to talking about t-shirts and merch and all that stuff, and I was, fresh into printing t-shirts, so I said, hey man, what if we slapped a logo on your car and I designed and printed your shirts for you for the events at Formula Drift? Alright, I was now sponsoring a Formula D driver. Sick. Now, because of that, we also talked about me joining him for Long Beach. He said, you can go out there and you can sell Fail Clothing shirts and make your brand known and meet people and do cool stuff. And I said, let me get back to you on that because I have a full-time job and I don't know if I can take off the work. Now, the event was that very next weekend, so I didn't have very long to try and get the days off. I decided to call in sick and said, you know what? I'm gonna go. It's gonna be fun. Totally worth it. You hammerhead son of a bitch. So I have no idea what to expect. I've never even seen a Formula D event, let alone understand what it actually entails or what's involved or what kind of people are going to be there. I have no idea. I'd never actually seen it, heard about it, other than the fact that this series was a feeder for it. I knew it was the professional series, but I didn't know anything else about it. So I decided to go, and that's where I'm going to end this episode. Formula D Long Beach changed my life forever, and I'm really excited to tell that story because that's where I decided that I wanted to do that one day. I made that conscious decision in 2008 to make it happen. So I'm going to go over my thoughts, feelings, emotions, goals, and everything else to do with my first Formula D event, as well as the rest of my second season, which will probably be quick because there wasn't much to it. The third season is where things got really interesting for me, so that's going to be a pretty good one as well. Thank you guys so much for watching again. It means the world to me that you're listening to my story. I hope it inspires you guys to keep drifting, to start drifting, to get into drifting for the right reasons. Just to have fun. And that's all I was doing at this point, was having the best time of my life. So the next episode of Scotch and a Beer with Officer Dan is going to come at you guys live from the Czech Republic. I'm going to be in Prague, mother truckers. I'm going to be drinking some Czech beer, and I'm going to tell you guys about the whole next chapter. Thanks again for watching. This is Officer Dan. Catch you on the flip side.